So I have been a psychotherapist for the past 25 years. And when I started my career, I started in a psychiatric hospital, mostly working with adolescents that were a danger to themselves or others. It's the most restrictive environment. So we always try to go to the least restrictive environment, working with them at the school, with therapists, with maybe interventions at home, and then the therapeutic homes, and if that's not working, then inpatient. So outpatient was tried first. So the teenagers I was working with were in inpatient. They could be there up to a year. So we also had a school there, which I worked in, to help them not fall behind in education as they were working in their emotional and behavioral issues. Always in the chart, there was some type of trauma or abuse early on that during teenage years was coming out, more and more of the anger if it was not healed. Play therapy, I recommend. I did play therapy with younger kids at another point. And I also work with child protective services. So seeing that if children receive treatment, especially play therapy early on, we see less of the behavioral problems come out during adolescence. And sometimes also it can be, for example, I like Dr. Amen. He does SPECT scans. We have one in Dallas and they're all around the nation. His books are really great on ADHD and other neurological issues and drug use. But he was working scanning brains to see what's going on, like to treatment for different treatments, especially ADHD. And for one adolescent that was being very aggressive and making threats at school, they found that he actually had a tumor that was pushing in centers of his brain that was increasing the aggression. And the tumor was removed, the behaviors were gone. So you always want to go, I like a holistic approach, biological, psychological, and spiritual, if the family's open to that, in my approach to therapy and diagnosing to see, is it hormonal, what's going on. And with teenagers, is definitely a big part of it is hormonal, but it can be environmental and also the family. So we would do a lot of family therapy. I work for a Department of Health, doing both individual with adolescent, but you also want to work with the family. What is going on, the family dynamic that could be also increasing the behaviors, but also to help. It's not just an individual, it's a whole unit, and how to help the teenager also to go back as they leave the psychiatric hospital, to go back home and to increase the chances of success in school. So working with the teachers, usually there was special ed teachers and they've been identified, accommodations. But we implemented both cognitive and behavioral. So cognitive behavioral approaches, helping them to change the way they're thinking, their perceptions about themselves, about their situation, about their past, their reaction, how to deal with their anger and reactions when they're upset, and knowing their triggers, just like with adults. But we have to remember that the brain develops from the back to the front, and this is the last part of the brain that develops. So yes, I worked with adults with the same issues, anger management, emotional regulation, but the part of the brain that the frontal lobe that is for emotional regulation, for impulse control, delay of gratification, making good decisions, good judgment. As I worked with parents, they're like, what were you thinking? Like when they do something and they're like, I'm so disappointed. I expected better. Like, what were you thinking? In my mind, it's not to excuse the behavior. I'm thinking they're part of the brain for making good decisions is not developed. It's like an app that hasn't downloaded yet. And so that doesn't fully develop till like the mid-20s. So I know that they're adults at 18, but that's just a random age. If we look into the brains, really it should be more like 25 because there's many factors that go into becoming an adult, but if we were just looking at the brain for men and women, excuse me, sorry, I don't know how to edit that out, so I'm gonna have to keep it in. Bless me. If we look at the brains of, some people say when you sneeze, it's because you're speaking the truth. And so as far as we know right now, with the brain, we see that part of the brain that you need to make good decisions, to think, that's not a good idea for me to jump this bridge or to take the car or to And we feel as parents like so disappointed, or I thought I taught them better. They just need more time. It's like a cake that needs to fully bake. It's not done yet. And so they need us to kind of keep boundaries. And it's an issue because there's also, we'll talk about it, how their brains are also wired for autonomy at the same time. And I'll put these PowerPoints up with some of this information that I'm talking about for you to see about the brain. But we do know that this part of the brain, it's your personality, but it is also impulses, delay of gratification, saying, no, I'm gonna do my homework and stop scrolling. Also, scrolling increases dopamine like cocaine. Same receptors as cocaine, can be very addictive for anybody. But we'll talk about some of the specific issues for adolescents during the stage in regards to those. And so let me look at. And so when you think, what were you thinking? Part of the brain that you need to make good decisions and good judgments is not formed. So they're not. And that's what happens. So let's start off more with the female brain. The female brain through evolution. So remember, psychology takes on an evolutionary approach to development. And so it's what helped our ancestors to adapt and survive and reproduce. That's what's passed down to us. So our species is about 200,000 years old. We evolved over millions of times, but the version, like the iPhone version of humanity today, is about 200,000 years old, as far as we know now. And unless other information comes up, that's what we have now. And so there's a very specific way that the female brain evolved that helped our ancestors to survive and adapt. And the female brain evolved, and we're living in a very different world that our ancestors 200,000 years lived, but it's the same brain, same wiring. It takes a long time for it to evolve. We might change it with technology, neural links and things like that, but biologically it takes a long time for it to change. So we still have the same brain. And the teenage female brain, the number one goal, and a lot of this is from Luann Brisendine's book, The Female Brain, the Male Brain, and it's looking at biological, evolutionary views on it. And she's Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, like very well researched. You can look, I really recommend it. And she also has the movie, The Female Brain, which is based on research, and that can help you understand a bit better, especially in relationships, how it applies in relationships. But number one goal of the teenage female brain is to become sexually desirable. So might become obsessed with attracting male attention. This is for heterosexuality, and compares themselves with peers in media. And so the things that maybe we do, it's again subconsciously to say, I am fertile, I am young, I'm not pregnant with another man's baby, pick me. So for most of our history, remember 200 years ago, we only lived to about 40 or 50. So for a lot of history, adolescents were like already midlife, and they 14, 15, 16, in some cultures still. And of course, it's not ideal in some cultures. It makes life hard, teen pregnancy. But for most of our history, and it's not to say it's okay, it's just to know that the brain is wired to start saying, okay, I'm ready to have babies, I'm ready to get married. So when your teenager says, I'm ready to be a mom, I want to marry my boyfriend, they have the same brain that was actually doing that for most of our history. So they're wanting to send the message with the plump lips, the long hair, healthy hair, smooth skin, flat stomach, all that, small waist. It's subconscious messages that our ancestors who had that, higher estrogen, more fertile, were more likely to be healthy, no mutations. We'll talk about symmetry and things like that. But it's all the things that say, look, high estrogen, pick me to protect and provide, and our offspring will be healthy. And we'll talk about in next week more on relationships and mating. But here it's like the beginning of it, sending out the message, I am healthy, I am fertile, and I am young. So the beauty industry has really monetized that whole evolutionary process because they know how our brain is wired for that. So the things we do to look younger or plump lips, all those things are messages to send. Even if you're not wanting to get pregnant, even if you're not looking for somebody, those were the things that subconsciously the male looked, because those, when they picked somebody like that, they were more likely to have a healthy baby. And so those were the ones that survived and continued off. And so that got wired into the male brain. Teenage brain, flooded with estrogen, just marinating. So the female brain is brainwashed with estrogen since the womb. But it also becomes very sensitive to stress hormones, to cortisol. It's like a paper cut in the brain. Like any bit of stress causes irritation. So when your teenage daughter, you're like, stop being so dramatic. It's just a little thing. And they kind of overreact. And you're like, why do you have to overreact over everything? It's just a tiny stressor. You need to know that, yes, we can start helping them to cope and react better and manage those. But some of that is biological, that their brain is hypersensitive to stress hormones. It starts getting used to it, but the hormones affect it to a way that it doesn't, to us as we're older. So moody, temperamental, resistant, very sensitive to social stress. So this is key, because most of our history today, you can live on your own, more independent, especially in individualistic cultures. There's still cultures that are tribal, community. You need each other. And so the female brain is wired. Connection is number one, to connect to others, to babies, to males, to females. It meant survival. If the other women in the tribe didn't like you, ostracized you, you were more likely to not make it, and your offspring and your children. We needed other women to teach us, to protect us, to help us. Community was everybody's children raised together, food together. And so if the other women, if you weren't part of the clique, it was death. So our brain is wired for that. The amygdala goes off, high alert, like a fire alarm. Imagine doing anything in your house while the fire alarm is sounding. It's impossible to concentrate, to do anything. That's why it's hard to focus at work, this is the average traditional female brain, evolutionary, kind of wired, prepackaged. Some women don't have the traditional for many reasons, biological, psychological, environmental. And so we're just talking about kind of the default. Psychology works with the average, the default. So this is the average default female brain. If you're like, well, I'm biological female, this doesn't sound like me, many reasons, that it's not bad or good, it's just different. But this is kind of the norm for evolution. If the majority of the female brain is like this, we're more likely to continue as a species for most of our history and the environment that created this. And so when your daughter says, oh my gosh, they didn't invite me to the party, and they make like they're gonna die, and it's like life and death, and you're like, it's not life and death, who cares, you'll have other friends, there'll be other parties, and you're like, you don't understand, if I don't go, I'm not gonna be part of the group, and now I'm gonna have to sit alone in the cafeteria. And it's just like, yes, psychologically nobody likes to be alone, but their reaction, both the stress plus being left out, it is like life and death, because for most of our history, it was life and death. So their brain reacts as if it is, because it was. If they got left out of a group event for most of our evolutionary history, it could lead to death. So the brain makes sure that she does something about it, that overreacts, so that she makes sure they do like her, to do whatever she can. It's survival. We're here speaking of her survival and her offspring. So just to be patient, to have compassion with our teenagers. I think that's why I work so well with them, because I don't take it personal. It was a lot harder when I had my own. They can trigger you. But it was, so you have to your own issues and them reacting. But you just watch them, give them the space, validate. Of course, don't let them hurt themselves or others. And then teach them, yes, of course, this is like, you understand that it feels that way, but to teach them that it's not life and death now, but you understand that they feel like it is, both psychological and biological. So they're more likely sensitive to stress, needing approval, acceptance, social rejection. Being with others increases oxytocin and dopamine, so they're wired to want to talk and flirt and socialize, hang out with others. So oxytocin, dopamine is trust, bonding, connecting, pleasure. So evolution wants the female brain to get a lot of pleasure from doing those activities, so that they do it to connect and to bond with others, and secrets, gossiping, cliques, shopping together. And again, kind of obsessed with their appearance, to show that they're fertile and healthy. Also, they start going to bed later, about an hour earlier than boys. That continues until later in life. So, again, who am I? That's the key question during the stage, to encourage them to take the time to find out.